wasn't until I was sitting drinking their coffee. Doesn't fit me. So I met them when out here and stuff. So all that was over. We were in Tbilisi, and in fact it happened right outside of our apartment. I think of nothing like that. There was a river. It was a sort of a creek. Our apartment had the next to the park. Let me think about it. And reflect on several levels. Right over the top. We go out on any we were the last.
All right, good evening, everyone, and thank you for your patience as we get started here. Good evening. Welcome to the Schar School of Policy and Government at George Mason University and Mason Square. I am Mark Rozelle. I serve as the Dean of the Schar School, and we're very proud to host the Michael V. Hayden Center for now the past 7 years. And I know many people here are Hayden Center regulars who attend these very high-quality forums. And in an era of hyper-partisan politics, there really is a need for forums such as these that provide informed analysis of the challenging issues of our times. As many of you know, we are strictly nonpartisan, non-ideological, and we care about good government and good public policy wherever it comes from, regardless of party or ideology. And the focus here is on the very complex issues of intelligence and security. Over the course of any academic year, we have major policymakers, directors of federal agencies, leading analysts and scholars leading our forums, such as the one this evening. Over 150 people signed up to attend this evening in person, so for those who showed up, thank you for attending. And we have over 200 signed up to attend virtually, maybe more now. But that means people throughout the United States and internationally are part of this program tonight. And by the latest count, 32 states, the District of Columbia, 3 continents, and 15 countries are watching this program. Tonight, General Hayden himself is doing what he has done at the Schar School now for over a decade. He's teaching a class. So his priorities are well ordered, and we're grateful to him for founding the Hayden Center and for continuing to educate the next generation of students in the fields of intelligence, security, and public policy. He sends his regards to all. So again, thank you for attending. I hope to see you at all of our future events here. And I now welcome to the stage the director of the Hayden Center, Larry Pfeiffer. Larry.
Thank you, Mark. Mark told you all the good stuff that I was going to tell you, so I can be even more brief than I usually am. Thank you all for coming. I know it's a busy time of year for students. It's a busy time with finals and papers. For the rest of you, I know we're competing with the beginning of the holiday party season, and some of you may still be in the Thanksgiving coma, so we're glad that you found some time to spend with us. Mark mentioned General Hayden is not with us tonight, but he's got the best excuse ever. He's teaching one of our classes. That's great. For those of you who are first-time attendees at the Hayden Center events, because maybe you saw something on social media or a friend told you about the event, if you'd like to know about the events first, please join our mailing list. Go to our homepage, haydencenter.gmu.edu, and you'll be able to just put your email address in a box, and I promise you all we're going to send you is information about events. Our event is being live streamed on YouTube and recorded, so if you don't want to have anybody know you were here, don't stand at the microphones.
Too late for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
The Hayden Center is on social media. We are amongst the many who are spending a lot more time on something called Blue Sky these days. So you can find us on Blue Sky, Threads, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. We post information about the Hayden Center, but we also repost information that's about intelligence and national security. So it's proven to be a pretty good resource for folks who are interested in that. If you are enjoying tonight's event and you'd like to comment on it, up there we've put some hashtags and handles. You can post about the event and use those to help us find your comments. That would be fantastic. There will be time set aside for your questions. Those of you in the audience will be directed to the microphones at in the two side aisles. David will let you know when it's time to do that, so start thinking about the kinds of questions you'd love to ask Sue Gordon, or you've always wanted to ask Sue. We would ask you, however, to keep your questions brief and in the form of a question. We would also love you to let us know who you are, but if you wish to remain anonymous, that's okay. But we always love to know who you are, and if you've got an organization you're representing that you're proud of, we'd love you to tell us who you're representing as well. For our virtual audience on YouTube, there is live chat function of YouTube. That's where you can post your questions. We'll be monitoring those, and we'll try to get to one or two or three of those questions as well. Following the event, we have a great reception with food and beverage in the adjacent multipurpose room across the way. So tonight, we welcome the Honorable Susan Gordon, hereafter to be referred to as Sue. She is a former Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence, served during the first Trump administration. She has a legendary 30-plus year career, much of which was spent at CIA. Her time at CIA took her to the leadership level in all of its major directorates. She was known as an innovative leader. She took those innovative skills to the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, where she served as the Deputy Director. She was so well regarded from her time at CIA and NGA that she was asked to go and serve as the Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence, the PDDNI, during the first Trump administration, where she served honorably for 2 years. While there, she drove innovation. She integrated and coordinated among the then 17 elements of the intel community. She advised members of the senior policy community, particularly in the NSC, National Security Council-led interagency process, as well as time spent in the Oval Office with the President and the National Security Advisor. Since 2019, she has been active speaking at events like this all around the country and the world. She serves on a number of major corporate boards. She has served on commissions, and she is also working with some universities. David Priest will once again serve as our moderator. David is a Hayden Center Senior Fellow, doing a heck of a load share of work this semester for us in this moderator role. He, for those who don't know, is a former CIA analyst, where he spent time as a daily intelligence briefer for some of the senior leaders of the U.S. government. He is the author of The President's Book of Secrets, available wherever books are sold. If you'd like to understand what the President's Daily Brief is all about, it is probably the best resource you can go to. And during time of presidential transition, it's a great resource to perhaps relook at, even if you've read it once before. He currently serves as the Director of Intelligence at Bedrock Knowledge Incorporated, which I'm told has nothing to do with the Flintstones. With that, I would like, that joke did not go over well. For the younger people, come see me later, I will tell you what the Flintstones are.
I thought it was hysterical.
With that, I will turn the floor over to David and Sue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry.
Thanks, Larry.
Appreciate it. So we have a little bit of time left after Sue's resume. Any questions? There's so many areas that we could explore, and typically when it's something that's advertised as a life in intelligence, the natural thing to do traditionally, obviously, we'll go through your career in chronological order and what you learned at each stage. But we're not doing that.
Oh, thank God.
No. We're just going to bounce idea to idea and see where it takes us. Truly like a stream of consciousness discussion. And the first thing I'm thinking of is not what you did to get where you are and your voyage along the way, but where we are now. And so the obvious question is, how good is Duke's basketball this year, women and men? Because you may not know this because Larry was so incomplete with his resume, but Sue was the only 3-year captain of the Duke women's basketball team. That's correct. Anyone not applauding, you can see yourself out. So how does it look this year?
Men are young, but I like the team. They're unselfish and they actually box out. So, you know, but young is hard. Like I'd love it if Duke would say, heck with this one and done thing. The talent differential isn't that much between the number 1 player and the number 100. Let's go for 50 to 100 and build a multi-year program, and we'll win many more national
Coach K
championships
tried
that
to
way.
hold out. He actually tried when
I know,
that started.
but I think you could.
And the Kentucky Duke, the
You
model.
know, be a good butler, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's it. Women, I don't know. They've had a really good week. I've been skeptical, but their defense is so good and the offense is clicking, so they'll make some hay. So maybe. I don't think they'll win a national championship this year, but they will knock off some teams that will.
There's a lot of people in the room who don't realize that Duke has not always been what it is now in basketball. For example, when you
Like when I played? Thanks.
I don't want to talk about the number of wins in the program when you started, like across your first 2 years. I don't want to talk about it.
So I will, because now you need to know. Okay, so if I had been able to pay Larry enough to get him to give the bio I would have wanted would be, this is Sue Gordon, she's old, grateful, and lucky. And have always been. I played basketball from 76 to 80, so after Title IX was signed, but well before most universities had any interest in being serious about it. So I started playing basketball when it was the jocks who got to a university and played the sport that they happened to play. Basketball wasn't my best sport, it was just the one they had. By the time I left 4 years later, it was only the other senior and I that didn't have a scholarship, and the girls that were playing had much more in common with the players today than those who I started with. I mean, so I had those 4 years I played in the first ACC tournament for women. I also, my sophomore year, painted Cameron Indoor Stadium for travel money. So I got to see well before women had anything, but saw the game become what the game is today. But to the record, my freshman year, we were 2-12, and we played no team that you've ever heard of. It was the AIAW. We played the Campbell Camels and the Western Carolina team. That, if you don't know where Western Carolina is, it's in Cullowhee, that booming town in Western Carolina. My sophomore year, the great Duke University did actually give their first scholarship to a phenomenal player named Tara McCarthy, who had the sweetest jump shot I'd ever seen. And she transformed our program so we were 1-19.
Hey, yeah.
My sophomore year, but we did play all now the big schools, Maryland and NC State, and in 1 week we lost by 50 to Clemson, 70 to Maryland, and 82 to NC State, 43 to 125, not that it was a seminal event in my life that I can still remember. And all you need to know about me as a player is I didn't think I was going to get to the game. As a matter of fact, it was 3 minutes left of the game before the coach looked down to my end of the bench, and we all said, we didn't do that shit.
Yeah.
So
That's an accomplishment, losing by 82 in any sport, like bowling. I mean, even that's hard. That's and yet you've said before that you never played a game where you felt like you would lose. Like you always went in thinking we can win this game.
Yeah.
Right?
Except that game, I didn't think we were, really, 10 minutes into the game, I thought, we're never going to score.
Okay.
There we got go, but they were that good. They had Kay and Faye Young. Does anyone know who Kay and Faye Young are? Kay married Bill Cowher of the Pittsburgh Steelers. They had June Doby, they had Ginger Rouse, and Chrissy Earnhardt. They had
it's a team.
players.
Yeah.
we were just still new. But my senior year, we beat them all.
That's right.
My senior year, we were 14 and 13. We beat every team.
Winning record. And you got your first leadership experience there because in another twist of fate, you were elected captain, co-captain of the team, and you didn't even play enough to letter in the sport.
3-time captain, 2-time letter winner.
Help us square that.
Wait, did someone feel sorry for me?
Yeah, I know,
Like,
right?
oh.
It's the first time, right? It's great. How does that happen? How does one gain the confidence of teammates enough to become captain and not really play as much?
I don't play as much. I never started a game except the pity game my senior year. I did, however, have a 78% free throw shooting average. So, yeah, not bad,
Okay.
right?
That beats
9 for
Shaq.
12
Yeah.
of my whole career. Anyway, I have no idea, except whatever it was, I think it's because I don't assign value to position, and I only care about outcome. And I don't think I could have articulated that. It just turned out that we had a 24-year-old coach, and me at 19 was more mature than she was, so my job was to, we're friends, right? My nickname was Fuzzy. Don't ask, because it's stupid, not because it's horrifying. And my recollection of my whole sophomore year was, Fuzzy, you talk to him, I can't. And so I think you do the job you can do, and it doesn't mean that you don't hate what you're not, but you recognize that the aim is more important than your personal preference. And I would say, truthfully, if I look back and say, how did someone with a bachelor's degree in zoology and no obvious pedigree that should allow the shockingly good career I got to have get there? I think it's because I did understand how to use a team. I did understand that the outcome was the important part, and I never protected myself. Like, I never made a choice that was for my advantage over the advantage of the organization. And so I think that's how you become a 19-year-old who never plays and the captain of the team.
Yeah. You mentioned zoology, so you have a degree in zoology?
I do.
Like most people getting zoology degrees, you went right into CIA.
Right.
I don't think I've ever asked you this. What was the recruitment process like? Was it you seeking out a career in intelligence, or did intelligence come to you?
Well, one, let's not besmirch zoology. It is the parent discipline. And it's mystery of life. And I will tell you why it turned out to be the important foundation of my intelligence career. Really what it was is I couldn't decide if I wanted to get my PhD in biomechanics or go to law school. And so I thought, well, that's just too big a range, right? So why don't you go and get a job and figure out what you want to do? And the CIA was hiring on campus. I'm the third kid of a naval officer, so kind of public service was in my DNA. And it turns out that in 1966, my dad had worked with Stan Turner in systems analysis for McNamara. And so they knew each other, and Stan Turner had been the director of the CIA, and he always thought I'd be a good spy, which of course I wouldn't. Do you see this face? Not a chance. Come on. Blush and giggle when I lie. But so I applied, and they hired me to do analysis of Soviet biological warfare. And so that makes sense, right? Yeah. You're now saying, oh, well, now we see how they hired a ZO major, critters. So the problem was, it was 1980, and I arrived 21 years old. I'm shiny. I was so shiny and new. I look 12. And I show up, and they say, oh, bad news bears, we've eliminated your job, because 1980 was one of those times when we were cutting jobs, and Stan Turner, in his previous role, had cut a lot of positions, so the job was gone. And they said, you have 30 days to find work, or we'll take away your offer of employment.
And where did you land?
In the Office of Scientific and Weapons Research, doing analysis of Soviet missile systems.
Okay, yeah.
Because a ZO major can do everything. Because,
right? Prove it.
Now you're ready for this, aren't you? Here's my argument. And I did say this on the day, because mechanical engineering is just applied zoology. Frictionless joints, baby's knees.
How does
I-beams,
the
rib
engineering
cages.
faculty feel about that?
I think I can prove it.
Yeah, that's right.
Have they made a
good
frictionless
story.
joint? A baby's knees are frictionless joints. Oh, there you go. Also, we're just going to finish this one up since you put me here. Actually, zoology is an inductive science, right? When you look at living systems, you have to presume that they're doing what they're doing perfectly. Your job is not to judge it because you've already assumed that it's perfectly set. You have to understand it. That's what intelligence is, right? Your job is to look at something and say, I'm going to seek to understand it, not to judge whether it's good or bad. And so I would say that it turned out to be kismet.
Okay, so you start out doing
With a good bullshit story, yeah.
Yeah. When you go there, it's just going to keep
Yeah,
going.
just take
So you start out in that job, and Larry gave what, half of the positions you've held. So you ended up helping run an imagery agency. You end up doing advanced analytic tools. You end up setting up a venture capital outfit. You end up PDD&I, helping run the Intel community. I mean, the kind way of saying that is you've had a wealth of experience taking advantage of your skills, or you just can't hold a job. So, like, what along the way compelled you to always seek new challenges, or for people to recognize, we want to apply what you're doing somewhere else?
Well, I've always thought of myself as just average. So it is really hard for me to actually, and certainly when I was in it, I wouldn't say that there's anything special. So everything you're going to get is now retrospective of how does this make sense. So here's how I make sense of it, is I do two things really well, maybe three. I don't believe I'm stuck with the knowledge I have. And so whatever job I get, I'm supposed to learn what it takes in order to do it. Not just use the fact that I'm a good talker and have a couple of IQ points, but actually get good at that job. And you can do that. The second is, if I have space, I'm going to use it. Right? If you give me a job, I'm going to do that job really well. And I don't spend any time looking at other people wondering what they should be doing or judging whether they're doing it well. No, I'm going to own my space. And the truth is, every job has space. It does have some domain that you can apply and you can do something with it. And so that's what I did early. And then the third thing is even though I was doing my job, I did pick my head up and I knew that there's the work and then there's the work. And so that combination of things meant that if you gave me something, I tended to do something with it. And the number of people who do things is smaller than you would think, and that tends to get people's attention. So they're like, oh, we have something new that we need done. Let's hire Sue. And I think early on, I probably got impatient because I'm more of a bear catcher than a bear skinner. Like, once I figured it out, I don't want to keep doing it. Later on, people would say, if you have a problem, hire Sue. If you need to make it bigger, hire Sue. If you need to make it smaller, if you need to think of something new. Because I was never about me, I was only about the job. That sounds way too self-aggrandizing. It just turns out to be how I approached it. And it was the transportation in my career.
Yeah. No, I think the self-aggrandizing part is claiming that you caught bears on the job. Because
Yeah, there you go.
that didn't happen very often in my experience. Talk a little bit about an implication of what you just said, right? Which is that you saw what the mission needed, essentially. Because one of the skills that's hard in the Intel community, which does have bureaucracy all throughout, is realizing that when you work with management, that you're not working for management in the sense that you're in a state of blind loyalty, right? You're trying to serve the mission to help them meet the mission, but you might be helping them do it in a way they themselves don't see. And that's something you excelled in your career, is not just making the people that were subordinate better, but making the people around you, 360, better. Talk through the logic there of almost like a refined sense of loyalty or an advanced sense of loyalty to the job means seeing the mission that everyone around you is trying to do.
So I actually would give credit to bosses I had that had the ability to be so good at their job that they would give a piece of it away knowing that it would be better done by someone who had full time to do it. And that really did happen early on to me when I went from analyzing Soviet systems to building US spacecraft. And then I had a boss that needed a new program, and he gave this GS-10 with no discernible skills the responsibility and $50 million in 6 months to come up with a new concept to do this for the first time. Go. Well, when I tell that story to people today, I say, what's weird about that? And they say, well, no one would ever give a GS-10 26-year-old responsibility coming up for a new program of record, much less $50 million with no direction on how to spend it and expect that you could turn it into a program. And yet, I did, and then dorked it up, and then they were so good that what I messed up, they could recover, and we got something that's been the foundation of everything forward. So to me, it's my transportation, and every good thing that happened was because I happened to have a boss that was the kind of leader that understood what needed to be done, give it to somebody else, and then create the room so that they can do it. And if George Tenet with In-Q-Tel, much the same. George just wanted something cool. And so he went to the director, sorry, George. And so he went to the director of science and technology, and a brilliant woman, Ruth David, had this idea for a thing called the Agile Intelligence Enterprise. And she gave it to me to figure it out. And she was totally wrong about what it should be, but she was right that we needed something to get to what was going on in Silicon Valley, and it needed to be around information. And she gave me all this room to do it, and we came up with a great solution in 7 months that is now 25 years old. But when I presented it to George Tenet, he didn't understand it, but he did trust the work, and so he did it. So to me, it's the leaders that understand how that have a vision, but understand that the way you get it done is by giving it away, trusting the work gets done, and then being good enough your job that any bobbles along the way that happens. And so I think that's kind of what happened for me, and I just happened to be a kid that believed I was supposed to do the job you gave me.
Let's talk about In-Q-Tel a little bit more, because there's such an interesting story there. For those of you who don't immediately have an image from that, if you've heard of Palantir, Google Earth, Data Miner,
Cloudera, everybody.
Palantir is there, but it wasn't always there. It had to be created, and you got to put it together. Talk about that, from the idea from George and Ruth to actually creating this board, this idea. What was the model? How weird was it for the Intel community, given procurement timelines and everything else, to do it the way that you helped create?
So In-Q-Tel was born in the summer of 98, when they had this idea that we needed to get to what was going on in Silicon Valley, because, and interestingly enough, and it's its own topic, why are we still having the same conversation? Because we haven't solved it, because we have DIUX and all the things that are still trying to solve this problem of how we get innovation into the system. I have thoughts on that, but then we needed to get to what was happening in the Valley, and we couldn't get it the same way, and so that was the task at hand, and I formed a little ragtag team. I will say, I became the person that you gave big jobs to, and then I'd say, hey, will you give me the 4 best people to do it? And they always say no. And so, how important is it? And so I would form a team made up of people between jobs, people in the penalty box, and people who liked working with me. And this is a really great lesson. Everyone that works for you is really pretty good. So quit being persnickety about the teams. Put together a team, give them a big task, and then be good at your job. So form this team, and we just had to figure out how to make it work. And so our first task was to do a study whether there was something that existed that would work. We decided there wasn't, and FFRDC wasn't the right model to do again, because FFRDCs were generally holding talent for government use, and this wasn't a moment of holding talent. And so ultimately we came up with this idea that we needed to create an incubator. It had to have 3 attributes, because this is the quotable Sue Gordon, you can't get to the future from the present. If you want to get to the future, you have to give something up, because you just can't carry all that weight. And so the things that we gave up to do In-Q-Tel were unclassified problems, because what the government's super good at is big problems and long time horizons and deep pockets. And so we used all that. We said, we're going to give you unclassified problems. We're going to give you undifferentiated funds. In other words, we're not going to tell you how to spend it. We're going to say, here's some money, you figure out how to spend it, and we're going to let the companies own the intellectual property, which in 1998 was anathema. And somehow we got that through.
You say somehow like it's magic, but that took George talking to members of Congress. It took you talking to the staffers and convincing them to do what their members wanted to do, which is not the way it's supposed to work. But I mean, think about it. As a model, how weird is it? We're going to give, what, tens of millions of dollars initially to these people who will not have direct oversight, who will own the intellectual property they create, and then we will buy from them what they create. That does sound a little unusual.
But it was brilliant, right?
Yeah.
Like so that point about we want to keep new ideas around long enough for them to become a product that we can buy. And the thesis was that our requirements were special, and so commercial endeavors wouldn't invest in them early. But if they existed, they would serve commercial purpose. Like, what a great idea. Yeah. That is, and it worked. The way it happens is there were 3 important things that happened. One, George Tenet was a bold leader who didn't redo the work in order to move forward. 2, he had a guy named Buzzy Krongard who was an industry guy. So I may have kind of designed it and knew intellectually that we ought to have an icon as the founder, we ought to have these sets of people to be on the board, and then they should hire someone from the Valley that was recognizable. We did call a meeting where George Tenet had a cold call to pitch Norm Augustine. But government people, when Norm Augustine said, oh, I don't have time, would say, oh, thanks for asking. We really appreciate it. We'll go on to someone else. Buzzy Krongard was like, do you have 5 minutes a day? Like, Buzzy was closer. Like, I don't think it would have happened if you had trusted the Morkadorka Borka Sue Gordon to close the deal. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess it's not a good idea. And he was like, can you do it? And then the last thing is we got, unbelievably, because of George Tenet's relationship with Congress, we got $50 million of top-line ad mid-cycle. Had we not gotten a top-line ad that didn't go through the staffers, it never would have happened. Yeah. And because we got that, I could move fast enough to keep the organization from killing it. Because new must be killed in its crib, and if you force new to compete with existing, it can't, because it can't prove that the theory is right. And what was the hardest thing about In-Q-Tel was Congress said, okay, if you'll just back off, we'll give you $5 million to do a study. And I'm like, why? We know we had the right answer. And they said, how do you know? And I said, because we did the work. And they're like, who did the work? And I said, I did the work. And they're like, well, that's not good enough. I'm like, what? Anyway, so I think that was the hardest part, is we didn't go through the normal process, but we did move fast.
The second hardest part was naming it, because everyone knew agility, intelligence enterprise. It was awful. But tell the story how you got to In-Q-Tel.
Because so the way my ragtag team, we decided we needed to come up with a name. We'd done everything. We had a design, we had a board, we were all ready, and we needed a name. And so we thought, oh, we should have like a Greek mythological figure name. Little did we know that that was so 1980s. Anyway, if we had talked to the guys in the Valley, they were like, seriously, we did that before, we're not there. But we came up with the name Peleus. And Peleus was a story of Aphrodite's suitor, and Zeus said he could have Aphrodite if he could catch her, but every time he tried to catch her, she would shapeshift, and he couldn't catch her. So ultimately what he did is he opened his hand, and she lit, right? And we thought, oh, this is such a great story. It's like let go of control and you get what you want. Well, there's another Peleus story, and so when the board met and incorporated under Peleus, they thought we probably should get, because it's like with all Greek mythology, there's like a really horrible story too, and so they couldn't stay with the name Peleus. So they quickly changed it to In-Q-It, another name we thought of, In for intelligence, Q for Q in James Bond movies, because the DS&T wasn't a good middle name, and IT for information technology.
But that sounds like another company.
Yeah, and then they got sued because it sounded like Intuit, and so it became In-Q-Tel.
Wow, that's quite a story.
It is, but we did come up with that name sitting in the Hay Adams bar after the first board meeting when the board incorporated it and we could back off. We decided we needed to be like the guys in Silicon Valley, and we have a napkin and we drew names.
Is that napkin in the CIA museum?
Oh, it's in my house. Yes. Yeah.
Well played.
Yeah.
Let's broaden out to technology. Most of your roles, not all of them, most of them had a heavy technology focus on them. I want to talk about a couple. One is heading analytic tools, which sounds like a derogatory term towards analysts, but we're talking about technology being applied to the craft of analysis. Analytic tools, why is that necessary in the general sense, and how has that advanced since you first started working on it?
Okay, so it predated In-Q-Tel. Ruth David had this idea that we needed to come up with offices to do some of the integrated work of, and kind of break down some of the stovepipes in the CIA that tended to be technical and then analytical and whatever. And so she came up with two new offices that were very topical. One was the Office of Advanced Analytic Tools that I got to form, and the other was CITO, Clandestine Information Technology Office, headed by a brilliant guy, Jim Gosler, that was really the forerunner of taking advantage of what was going on in the digital environment. And those were two joint offices. Advanced analytic tools was a little early to need. So the idea was right. I mean, you're seeing it now. But it was a little early to need. As a matter of fact, as soon as you get money, you have to spend money. I spent some of my money just to bring internet into the agency because we didn't have it at the time. So you just didn't have the foundational infrastructure to have the tools act on the data in any meaningful way. So we did some good advancing. We envisioned the things that needed to be done. We made some investments, but over time, I think it was just early to need. But it was the right idea. CITO had a much more obvious path of success because it was right at the time in '98 when the world changed. The wall had fallen. You're seeing the beginning of terrorism. Our adversaries go to different spaces, and CITO became the place that allowed us to go and chase them where they were, and becomes the beginning of really information operations across the board.
To close on analytic tools, by the time you're principal deputy DNI overseeing the intelligence community, analytic tools were incorporated in all kinds of agencies, departments, bureaus, et cetera. Can you see the through line, even though you stepped away from it at that point? Can you see how it got to where you were overseeing the enterprise?
Absolutely. When I say it was early to need, what happened with eyesight was really important. What Stephanie and Jim did with eyesight, and listen, we can judge the program in terms of how that was prosecuted, but the idea that we needed to be able to share information and then act on all the information, not just in little stovepipes, was necessary. That didn't exist in '96 with AAT. Once it existed, thanks to eyesight, then now you have that moment where technology and opportunity meet up. But because I'm never satisfied with Snoopy dancing about successes, we needed to now move into where analytic tools were going, which was artificial intelligence. And if you looked, now I'm sitting in the principal deputy spot, can see the whole community. we needed a community program because it wasn't acting on each stovepipe. And we needed to pool our resources to make real headway. And so you actually, some of the experiences from AAT, I think you can see in the AIM program, which is you need to do this in more things. As a matter of fact, I've never pulled out those charts, and there might be some similarity even if I didn't do it, just because the times allowed it.
The other technology question I have is I still hear from people inside the community, people using language that characterizes technology as risk more than technology as opportunity. I suspect that's an attitude that you don't subscribe to, that technology as risk goes against a lot of what you built over the years. Talk through that. How do you get people on board who maybe don't have the background you have to see that technology is an opportunity multiplier and it shouldn't be seen primarily as a risk?
Well, what a great question. So let's just talk about change as a foundation for that. Everyone hates change. The way I've been able to affect change is because I convince people that irrelevance is worse. And so you have to start with seeing that you must be something different, right? You just can't hold here. And so if you can't hold here, then everyone says, okay, now we need to be somewhere different, and they can decide that they're going to move. Now, technology is a part of any change. The problem is that most of our leaders, we still have technical people and non-technical people. That's still a problem, and we're going to have to overcome that in the next couple of years because we're still not totally embracing that technology is just the instantiation of the same motivations that we've always had. So we have to get there. So we have a problem because the leaders who are making decisions about what we pursue are not comfortable understanding what technology does, and technologists are not comfortable describing anything other than the technology, which who cares? They need to be talking about what the technology would do. Right? And so we've got to work on that. But I think the foundation of your risk question is, what I tried to do is, when you're making a change, what you have to show is that you account for the risks that people understand differently. I can't wish that the risk didn't exist. I'm going to account for it differently. In other words, I'm not going to wave it away because no leader that doesn't understand it is going to accept it, wave it away. I'm going to account for it differently. So you just, my approach has always been kind of to bounce it up above where everyone is, to get everyone to say, well, okay, I guess I have to do that. And then have them go back down into the things that now we can do because we've agreed that we must go there, and then you just show how to do it. But this technology, non-technology riff is really problematic still. And we just have to get there.
The PD...
Neatly, if we were just at a university that could do cross-cutting programs and really address this, it would be so
right? Wouldn't that
awesome.
be amazing? The PDDNI, I always want to put another
Worst
D in there.
acronym ever.
Well, especially
Now.
Especially now after what's happened recently in the news, because
Luckily,
people used to
I was
refer to
never-
it as the P Diddy, and
Yeah, never, not me.
No,
Like,
no.
I'm not cool. I was
That's not
never
right.
cool enough to be called the P. Diddy.
no, thank God, that's a good thing.
So it worked out for me.
Trust me, you dodged one. You followed in the footsteps, among others, General Hayden in that job, Stephanie O'Sullivan. So you inherited a still growing organization, still growing sense of organizational culture, and what needs to happen with everything from knowledge management to community requirements, everything. And yet, even now, we see how many, decades later, we see an op-ed in the Washington Post where somebody says, you're talking about cutting government programs and getting government efficiency? Get rid of the OD&I. We don't need it. Reactions?
There's no one that has worked in government for a living that doesn't think that government needs to be smaller, more efficient in these ways. So, no one should argue that point because all of us know it's true. And I think we carry so much of the past with us that we're trying to solve the future and what's left over, and we need to do something to break that cycle. I think we need people who run processes that feel empowered to reimagine the process, because without changes in our processes, we're not going to get there. So a bunch of things. So let's just take the notion of overhead and say, yes, we need to do all that. I have a theory on how you do it, and it isn't a bottom 10% exercise, because you never get there getting rid of stuff. You have to get there by knowing where you want to go. The D&I, the position, while it is one of the weakest statutorily, I think we would not be where we are in terms of understanding the threat were it not for the D&I.
Why?
Without the D&I, you would have never integrated the domestic intelligence agencies into the intelligence community in any meaningful way. And when it became a digital world and our adversaries and competitors could completely cross any distance and obliterate any boundary, they knew that the intelligence community couldn't chase them if they were here. And we would have been stuck if you hadn't integrated those. And I love my CIA, but I would say they would have never done the same things of integration that the D&I did. So that's one. The second is, you really did need to integrate. So if the first D&I was about coming up with common policies and making it work as one, the second were really integration, because you needed to take all of the intelligence and allow it to show what the picture was, more than one agency that already had operational imperatives being the one that adjudicated what that was. So integration was super important. And it isn't perfect, and it hasn't been perfect, but it was also necessary for collection and things like that. The D&I got a chance to serve under really needed to change to leadership, because even though there's a brilliance in the D&I not being the equivalent of a secretary, which means that the intelligence community remains a loose confederation of independent organizations that have budgets and views, and so they are faster and quicker to missions at the ones we know. When you have a strategic shift, the D&I needs to be able to use the budget authority it has in order to lead it to do new things. And again, that won't naturally happen without someone to say, this is now, we need to shift to China from this. And so using that budget authority. So I think any organization can change. I think there are some elements that are probably artifacts, even though I think counterterrorism is still incredibly important, albeit different than it was in 2001. The intelligence community does terrorism in all its agencies differently, so does it need to be as big? I think there are always questions about you can do, but whether you need a D&I believe you do.
Okay. Yep. We're going to open it up to questions in a moment, so if you're in-house, please make your way to a microphone. And we also have some online questions that we can take as well. There's one area we haven't talked about it, and I hate that we haven't. I've talked to General Hayden about this, that we need to focus on this more, especially at CIA, when we have conversations about the history and lessons and careers. We talk about operators who collect information. We talk about analysts who process and analyze it. Sometimes we talk about covert operators doing covert action. And we rarely talk about support. None of it happens without the Directorate of Support, which you had some very close, warm personal experience with. Talk about several of the functions within support and why it is that we agree that some of the most capable, forward-leaning officers, without which nothing else would happen, are those logistics officers who go out in the field and do amazing things.
Yeah, I loved being the director of support. I just, probably the only job I really hated leaving. So support at the CIA is all finance, logistics, HR, then IT, security, facilities, overseas, all the physical presence, and it has to do everything 3 times. It does it clandestinely, covertly, and openly. It is an incredibly complex but tactile discipline. Like you can do it. It's tractable. It isn't like, I wonder what Putin's thinking, which is really, really hard. This is complex and tractable. And the way I would describe it is, I'm going to show you all what support is like. It's like that, nothing. It's the quiet that lets mission happen. It is unbelievable. It is a culture of service within a culture of service. But I will tell you what I tried to do and why moving leaders amongst disciplines, but still having them believe they're responsible for the new discipline, not trying to do the thing they did before in the same place is, I thought support had become derivative. And derivative of a decision that somebody else had made. You know, you'd like to do that? You bet, we can do anything. You need a base in Juba in 10 days, we can build a base from red dirt in 10 days, we can of course do it. But what I thought they needed to be was at the decision-making table, whether that base needed to be there or somebody else, someplace else. In other words, there is craft to support that they know that would affect decisions about, would 10 miles away be 1% less efficient, but 10 times less costly? And we never had those discussions because support was a derivative discipline. And I think if you look at where we are now, needing to transform how we do our work, not just what we work, those support functions, believing that they have the authority to reimagine procurement. And today, if you go to a procurement organization, you say, hey, would you reimagine procurement? They're like, not our job. Would you reimagine security? Not my job. My job is to enforce it. Now, so think about what we have if our support people who have craft are just sitting believing that they're supposed to preserve some decision made in the past. And let's say they're not responsible. Who is thinking every day about whether security should be done differently? Nobody. So what I loved about it was the possibility that its innovation allowed in terms of mission decision making. And I think it was, but the women and men, man, you wanna see a leader on the hoof, you get a GS-10 logo, you know, who, depending on where they're stationed on any given day, is figuring out how to get the money, the food, run the base, the commo goes out, so I guess I'll do commo, the chief of base leaves, so I guess I'm the chief of base. You wanna see leadership? You see those, great discipline, don't sneeze at it, and I would opine that those disciplines at this moment, when organizations and the government needs to be transformed, it isn't just the tanks we need. It's we need our best leaders to be reimagining processes, and man, those people delivered every single day. Absolutely. How do you get a zone major who had done space and cyber and advanced analytic tools, you put her in that job, and how did we do what we did in my 2 years? I trusted them. Our people never let us down, and those people never let me down. It was great. Thanks for letting me reminisce.
Of course. We'll take some questions now, because I could and may keep this going for 18 hours
But
myself.
we can talk about anything. I'm your own personal AMA.
Yeah.
Ms. Gordon, you've had a long career. Do I need to turn this on?
It should be on.
Okay. You've had a very long career. Would you say a few words about human intelligence that you've seen going back to 1980 and onward? Some people say that there have been a few problems in the area of intelligence, and particularly human intelligence. So I'll give you one example, the window of vulnerability when you started out. Caspar Weinberger made a big deal. There was a window of vulnerability. There wasn't a window of Could you just talk a little bit about human intelligence?
Not not my discipline, so I will try and represent them as well as I can. So when I started shooting, certainly human intelligence and the women and men that practiced this gave us the coin of the realm, which was intention. And the human operators that I knew were the best geopoliticians of anyone. They knew their ground, they knew the culture. One of the greatest misnomers that people that aren't close to people that practice that discipline is just how much respect they have for the women and men in the cultures and the locations they serve. It is not, in my experience, an act of disrespect, but of fundamental respect. So the discipline and the people that practiced it, despite things we can talk about, too much autonomy, mistakes that they made in terms of who they trusted or what they saw, through most of my career, what they delivered was something that we needed more than anything else, which was intention, because you can't just add up capability and get to use. And that's what they offered. And when we had the ability to put humans everywhere because we were able to hide their presence in a world that wasn't so transparent, that physical presence that we had everywhere gave us insight that was unparalleled. If I go back to even Benghazi, why were we in Benghazi? Because that's where we needed people to be in order to understand what was going on. And so incredibly important discipline. Interesting, the world becomes more transparent, all the information, even our assets are tweeting. Now you have the ability to get more information, not necessarily just with a human, but you can actually get into human communications, and I could probably opine that with enough data, I can infer intent. I may tell you that this weekend I want to go up to Annapolis and sit at Pusser's and watch the boats go in and out of Millionaire Alley, but if you look at my data, you know that exactly what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Costco, go get gas, and then go back and watch TV, because you're going to be able to see and you're going to know my intent. So I think that a couple things have made it more difficult. The world has gotten more transparent. It is harder to be other than who you are. We've had failures that have allowed people to lose their lives or lose their access that has taken away our ability to be as present. And we have been slow to use data as robustly as we can. But that thing that human intelligence was trying to provide is still vital. And I would argue that the purveyors of human intelligence were some of the best at understanding how to manage risk. And so that combination of that discipline and those officers made the community better because it understood the whole perspective. So that was kind of a ramble through it, but it was a great question, and I wish I had answered it better for you tomorrow morning.
Larry, do we have any questions from online?
Yes, we do. So we've
Make
got,
them less complex. That was a really good question. I hope I was halfway decent.
So we've got some questions in the YouTube live chat. Thank you all for doing that. I'm going to combine questions from two audience members, Gizem Korkmaz and a guy with the coolest name ever, Joe Spytek.
Oh, sure.
And they relate with NGA. They were interested in you talking a little bit about your time at NGA. What's your opinion about NGA's approach to adopting emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning? And then from your time at NGA, what did you learn that you then took to the community management role you had at
Awesome.
the ODNI?
So I'm going to answer shorter only because I want to get to more questions, not because I want to give it short shrift. Love NGA, love geospatial intelligence. Anything put in the context of space and time is more understandable. It is so foundational, and it has a certainty to it that provides a really great understanding for understanding other activities around it. The discipline itself is interesting, but it is an enabler for other understanding is super interesting. I think NGA, under the guy I work for, Robert Cardillo, Robert did something incredibly well, and that is he saw what was happening with the commercialization of technology And he didn't just imagine a modern NGA, he imagined NGA in the future. And I think that set the agency on a really interesting course of technological advance that allowed them to invest in things like services early, making more of their product openly available, recognizing this is a contribution and a great example of government, which is investment that was made for security but now is then offered to societal good. So I think he saw that coming. I think what it's doing now, I loved my time there because again, like I had all these times where things were changing and I got to be there to kind of help them along the way. I think NGA became more of a driver of technological advance in the use of both data and imagery. I think it still has distance to travel. I wish for NGA, it's the Sue Gordon owning your space. It's an incredibly interesting time of the kind of a geospatial analysis that can be done combined with what's available commercially in terms of data. And I think they can be on the forefront of that in really interesting ways if they keep on building on the things they've done. But one of my favorite experiences, and again, talk about another culture of service within a culture of service, great discipline, incredibly important for contextual understanding.
Thank you. Please.
Yeah, so in terms of global influence and power for all of our challenges and our faults perhaps, we do seem to be still the world leader. And it occurs to me that innovation is likely one of the biggest keys to that, a culture of innovation in general. And so I'd like to, and as we're kind of facing down a new century of waning power in terms of our global positioning, how much can we have confidence in that being one of the major keys to our continued influence?
Well, I think what a great question. Man, I love this moment. I think this is a moment made for intelligence. I really do. It's a time of strategic uncertainty where we really don't know what next is going to look like. I think the world order, if it hasn't already shifted, it's shifting. I think sides are being chosen. I think there are questions about what we see and what we do about it. I think the discipline of intelligence is necessary. I think intelligence is knowing the truth, seeing beyond the horizon, and allowing leaders to act before events dictate. There is nothing passé about that, but how you apply it in this world, how do you use all the data, how do you free yourselves from how we used to do it because the world doesn't require the same things we did before. I challenge secrecy because intelligence is about advantage, and I don't know that secrecy is how you protect information advantage. It's probably speed to use. And so I think transparency is something that really needs transparency and speed that could be our new advantage. And so if you see this world, if you know that there are adversaries and competitors and allies and partners trying to decide what the sides are going to be, we need to understand it better. And intelligence is a discipline that can allow us to do that, but only if we really invest in understanding what's going on, go back to our core discipline, and that's going to go to and through information. I think two things need to happen for that future to be realized. Number one is our leadership needs to see that understanding this world is still super important, that there are enough decisions to be made, that it isn't just about what we want, that there are voices that are choosing our future outside of what the U.S. does. And then the second is reinvesting in the importance and the relevance and the need and the urgency of the kind of insight and advantage that intelligence can give you, and say, well, then how do we do that? Back to my point of relevance. This is a great time to shake it all up. And I would opine that it's a great time with administration change and with this administration change that is creating this kind of, we want it different, it has to be different. Put aside, like I did, what Ruth David said about what In-Q-Tel needs to be. I want a leader to say, okay, we need to be different. Let's go and be different. So how confident am I that we will? I don't know that yet. How confident am I that we could? 100%. This is not a 3 miracle job. This maybe requires 1, but we can always pull 1 off. This really is about understanding the moment, seeing what needs to be understood, and then going and doing what we have always done, which is said, well, what do I need to do in order to make that happen? I would love this job on this day.
Thank you. We have time for one more question in person, and then one more if we get one from the web.
Hi, Sue.
You know too much, Mary. Sorry, I've got to go.
I was lucky enough to get to work for you a couple of times. It was a great joy of my career.
Oh, you work for the Better Gordon. Don't pander to me.
I worked for both, but it's so apparent the vision that you bring and that you've brought to the organizations that you served. The other aspect of your leadership that I loved so much was your ability to inspire and motivate and really bring magic to the organizations and to the people. And that's a rare gift. It's also something that I think those of us that aspire to lead people would love to hear. You know, what are your kind of top 3 or top 5 strategies and how to bring people along and really get them excited about what you need them to do?
Well, thanks. You're kind. And you actually proved the point about I never had to be good. I just had to trust the people that I got a chance to work with. You know, there are a few things that only leaders can do. And one of them is you really need to see very clearly what is, not what you prefer. And you have to see that without protection of the domain you have or anything else. So the first strategy is just be really clear-eyed about the moment in which you find yourself. And then say, well, given that I own some domain, what should we be doing about it? Sometimes the answer is we shouldn't exist anymore. And you have to be willing to do that. And sometimes, and when you talk to your women and men, you get them to see that that is their contribution at the moment. Because even though most of us over time sometimes forget how thrilled we were just to have a job, that person is still there inside. And so that really is it. I mean, there just isn't much more. And then realize that they are in it too, that you don't know anything, and then they're part of the solution, and you're not telling them. And then I guess the last thing I'd say, Mary, is that I always had a line that says, yeah, but what if we could? And people would always change it and say, we will. And I'm like, I don't think that's as powerful. I think it is way more powerful to say, yeah, but what if we could do it? Like, what if we can pull this off? And it's my experience that people are only cynical to protect themselves. That if you show them a way that they can do something positive and it won't cost them because you're in it with them. And you don't even have to be, even if you make a mistake, they'll forgive the mistake because it was nothing more than a mistake. and that's why I think this time is actually not that difficult a time for leaders to inspire the people who have already chosen to be there to do something special with the hours they have. I don't know if that was the right answer, but that's just kind of, I talk about the moment, talk about the opportunity, don't talk about what we're not. We will always not be much more than we are, but let's talk about where we could go and how we get there. Convince them that they're supposed to do the job before them, and then throw your lot in with them. And I'm looking at faces of people I've worked with that I did this well and not so well, but on the days I didn't do it well, I was still trying to do it well. And your people will forgive that in you because they want to come, they do. And this moment could be our best. This moment of disruption in who we are as a nation comes at a time where the world is disrupted and we had to do something anyway. Use it. Use it.
Final.
Okay, so I will again grab a couple of questions from the YouTube live chat.
I keep promising I'm going to answer them shorter, Larry. It never happens.
I'm sure
It
some
never
of those
happens.
people in the audience, some are hungry, but some probably would love to have you sit on the stage for another hour. So these questions are somewhat related because they are looking at the immediate future with the new administration coming in. So the first is a question about, is the IC worried that efficiency talk from the incoming administration, are they worried about whether that will result in radical cuts or limitations on mission for the community? And, obviously you're not in the community now, so you can't talk for them, but you've been in the community, so you can probably address the concern. And then secondly is the question of the polarized environment in which we currently exist, extremely polarized environment. Given your extensive career in the IC and your emphasis on integrity and apolitical service, what would your advice be to leaders in how they could ensure that intelligence remains free from political influence in that environment?
Wow, great questions. Did I say I still have PTSD over leaving my mates in the foxhole without me? Let's see. There are a couple mistruths that are kind of foundational right now, and that is the idea of a malfeasant government. And I'm old and I've seen a lot, and I've also seen malfeasant governments. Our government isn't nearly good enough, but it isn't malfeasant. And so what I would hope is just a talking point and not a reality in the approach that people come in is to make it better, not harm it as though it's somehow wrong. So that's my one hope for incoming leaders is make it better. You don't have to destroy it because it does do important things. These are serious jobs. So that's the biggest problem I have. For everyone, I would remind you that a tweet isn't policy. And that's not a glib statement. That's just, there will be disruption and there will be change, but try not to over-rotate just on statements. Try and do a little bit of keeping your eyes on the bows. I think this is where the intelligence community has been really good, and it has some natural advantages because it is policy support. And so at its core, intelligence officers know that all they have to do is pursue the truth as hard as they can, and then present it in a way that it can be used for setting policy. And so I think that the intelligence community has some natural advantages in believing that its mission is important and doing the best job. Now, I will say that in the first Trump administration, I think that the intelligence community didn't understand that the leadership has shifted from one that was political military in focus to one that was economic in focus, and we were a little bit slow to produce the intelligence that was supporting the policies that wanted to be done. And so you do have to do that. But I think in general, the community understands that. So I think anything that is just broad-based, cutting numbers, efficiency without knowing where you're going is unlikely to achieve the outcome. Let's say I can't choose the leaders and leaders coming in. What would I tell the women and men and the people in the community to say is to take the intention and try and put the best approach forward to achieve those objectives of greater efficiency, greater focus, greater clarity of the products, rather than trying to prove that what you've done is good. Try and understand what they're looking for and deliver it according to the standards that you have. And I went to a class that was about crisis management, and the lesson I took away that in any crisis there's a hero and a villain, and your job is to become the hero as fast as you can, and you don't become the hero by explaining you're not the villain. Right? So what I would say to my community is unfocus your eyes, bounce up to the higher level statement that says the world has changed, our processes aren't as responsive to the American people or to the world order as we need. We need to be more efficient so our resources can be focused on the job that only we can do. Awesome, I can get behind that. Now, how do we leap into the fray on that? Because that's the space we own. And I think that's a decent starting place to be able for the collective to find its way forward, because the truth is, what we all know is there's actually only one side here that we care about, and that's America and our allies and partners. And so it's like risk, showing how you can account for it differently, not standing there and insisting how you've done it is the only way it can be done. So since I can't control the incoming leaders, what I would admonish my colleagues to do is to defocus, remember who we are, and try and show how we can offer what this moment demands.
I love that. Join me. Thanks, Sue.
All right. So thank you, Sue. Thank you, David, again for doing a wonderful job. So as many of you know, for some strange reason, we as a nation have decided that the Tuesday after Thanksgiving is something called Giving Tuesday. And so I would be remiss if I did not, well, I'd be remiss if this thing worked. All right, gonna have to do it the hard way here.
Careful which screen you pull up.
Okay, you pull up your thing. Let me talk about Giving Tuesday for a moment. So I worry a lot about trust. I think the way we rebuild trust and kind of get back to some sorts of normalcy is by investing locally. Mm-hmm. Right? That's where we have the most commonality. Those are the things we're doing. So to me, when I hear Giving Tuesday, I think about investing in local, whether that's your local university or whether that's some other group. So I think it's a perfect time. There you go. I stalled for you, Larry.
That's fantastic, thank you. And there's nothing more local for those who are in attendance here than the Hayden Center. So we love doing these events for you. They don't cost a lot of money, but they do cost some money. The university's been great. We've got some benefactors who've supported us, but we'd welcome any kind of gift or donation any of you could give. The QR code that was on the screen a moment ago that just went away is a QR code. Boy, it does not want, see, it must not want me to beg for money because it's not letting me.
Camouflage in this seat.
All right, so the QR code on the screen can get you to a site that will let you choose the amount of gift. We'll take $1, we'll take $50. If you have $100,000 you want to give us, we'll take that too. But just copy the QR code. It's on the screen. It's also on a sign as you head over to the multipurpose room. And that's actually the more important thing is our event is concluded. Please join us across the hall in the multipurpose room for a little food and beverage. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you all.
Thank you.
I have to tell you, I will face 20 students next month.